Ah, the Galactic Military Academy, where the cream of the crop, the best of the best, Oh, who am I kidding? It's where we dump all the species rejects and hope they don't blow up the simulator again. General Zixnax of the Arcturian High Command sighed, his tentacles drooping with the weight of his exasperation. He glanced around the observation deck, taking in the motley crew of alien generals assembled to witness the latest batch of cadets attempt the infamous 3-day siege simulation. To his right, General Klopax of the Centauri Collective was practically vibrating with excitement, her bioluminescent patches pulsing in anticipation. Great, another emotional light show. Just what I needed today. "Oh, this is so thrilling," Klopax chirped, her voice grating on Zixnax's auditory receptors. "I can't wait to see how the cadets handle the challenges we've prepared." Zixnax rolled all 7 of his eyes. Thrilling? More like mind-numbingly predictable. They'll bumble around for 3 days. Half of them will die from friendly fire, and we'll all pretend it was a valuable learning experience. From his left came a rumbling chuckle. General Vaughn of the Taurian Empire, a mountain of muscle and scales, shook his massive head. "Come now, Zixnax, where's your sense of adventure? Perhaps this batch will surprise us." "The day these cadets surprise me is the day I sprout wings and fly," Zixnax muttered. As if on cue, the doors to the simulation chamber hissed open, and the cadets began filing in. Zixnax's tentacles curled in distaste as he observed the usual mix of species. Gangly proxians with their multiple limbs tangling together, bulbous Gassians floating uncertainly, and— Wait a moment. Zixnax's eyes narrowed as he spotted something unusual. Are those Terrans? Indeed, bringing up the rear of the group were 5 human cadets, looking absurdly small and fragile next to their alien counterparts. Zixnax felt a flicker of interest for the first time in centuries. "Well, well," he mused aloud. "Looks like we've got some Deathworlders in the mix this time." Klopax's bioluminescence shifted to a concerned purple. Deathworlders? But isn't that dangerous? What if they hurt the other cadets? Vaughn let out another booming laugh. Hurt them, those scrawny bipeds? I'd be more worried about them getting stepped on. Zixnax waved a tentacle dismissively. "Relax, Klopax. They're here, which means they passed the entrance exams like everyone else, though how they manage that with their primitive brains is beyond me." As the last of the cadets entered the simulation chamber, a disembodied voice announced the start of the exercise. "Cadets, your mission is to defend the galactic capital against a 3-day siege by a superior enemy force. You have limited resources and must work together to survive. The simulation begins now." The assembled generals settled in for what they assumed would be a long, tedious 3 days of watching incompetent cadets fumble their way through basic military strategy. How wrong they were. 15 minutes later. "What in the name of the 7 moons of Arcturus is happening?" Zixnax sputtered, his tentacles flailing in disbelief. The observation deck was in chaos. Generals from a dozen different species were shouting, gesticulating, and in some cases emitting distress pheromones as they watched the unfolding scene in the simulation chamber. On the massive view screen, the 5 human cadets were, well, dominating. Seemed too mild a term. Absolutely decimating might be more accurate. Or perhaps making a mockery of several millennia of alien military doctrine. It had started innocuously enough. While the alien cadets had immediately begun arguing over command structure and resource allocation, the humans had simply acted. They'd split up, each taking on a specific role with an efficiency that bordered on the terrifying. The tallest human, a female named Jensen, had somehow hacked into the simulation's code within the first 2 minutes. She'd reprogrammed the defense turrets to fire at twice their normal rate, while simultaneously causing the enemy's weapons to jam every 3rd shot. Meanwhile, a stocky male called Rodriguez had redesigned the city's entire infrastructure on the fly, creating an intricate network of traps and choke points that the simulated enemy force was now hopelessly tangled in. The third human, a lithe redhead known as O'Malley, had taken command of the panicking alien cadets. She'd organized them into a surprisingly effective support unit, using their various alien abilities in ways that even Zixnax had never considered. But it was the last two humans who were really causing the generals to question their sanity. Twins, Chen and Li, had somehow managed to capture an enemy battle cruiser. They were now using it to systematically destroy the rest of the invasion fleet, all while broadcasting a series of what they called Yo Mama jokes on all frequencies. This is impossible, General Klopax wailed, her bioluminescent patches flashing through colors faster than a malfunctioning disco ball. They can't be beating the simulation. We designed it to be unwinnable. Vaughn, for once, was speechless. His massive jaw hung open, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth that seemed considerably less impressive in light of what 5 squishy humans were accomplishing. Zixnax found himself torn between outrage and a grudging admiration. "Well," he said dryly, "I suppose I'd better start working on my flying skills. Anyone have a spare set of wings?" On the view screen, the simulated enemy commander appeared, looking shell-shocked and more than a little singed. We surrender," it croaked. "Please, just make it stop." The human called Jensen grinned, her fingers still flying over a makeshift console she'd apparently constructed from spare parts. "Oh, come on. We were just getting started. Anyone up for round 2? Her fellow humans cheered, while the alien cadets looked on in a mixture of awe and terror. As the simulation powered down, declaring an unprecedented victory, the observation deck erupted into chaos once more. Generals argued, technicians frantically checked for system malfunctions, and more than a few high-ranking officials quietly updated their retirement plans. Zixnax, however, remained calm. A slow smile spread across his face, tentacles curling with an emotion he hadn't felt in centuries: excitement. "Well, my esteemed colleagues," he announced, raising his voice above the din, "it seems we have a new lesson to learn, and our teachers," he gestured to the 5 grinning humans on the view screen, "are just getting warmed up." As the other generals turned to stare at him in disbelief, Zixnax couldn't help but add, "I don't know about you, but I, for one, welcome our new Deathworlder overlords. Now who's up for seeing what they can do with the real battlefield?" The resulting uproar was music to his ears. "Perhaps," Zixnax mused, "retirement can wait a few more centuries. Things are finally getting interesting around here." In the days that followed, the Galactic Military Academy found itself turned upside down, inside out, and occasionally phased slightly out of normal space-time. The 5 human cadets, far from resting on their laurels, seemed to take their unprecedented victory as a challenge to outdo themselves. General Zixnax, much to his own surprise, found himself at the center of it all. He'd appointed himself as the unofficial liaison between the humans and the rest of the Academy, a position that was equal parts thrilling and terrifying. "Cadet Jensen," he said, trying to keep his tentacles from trembling, "when I asked you to improve our cyber security, I didn't mean for you to hack every major government in the galaxy." The tall human grinned, not looking remotely apologetic. "But, sir, how else were we supposed to test if the new firewalls were effective? Don't worry, I left them all a nice note and some cookies." Zixnax decided he didn't want to know if she meant digital cookies or the edible kind. With these humans, either was possible. Meanwhile, Cadet Rodriguez had taken it upon himself to redesign the entire academy, literally. Zixnax had arrived one morning to find the buildings rearranged into what the human called a more efficient configuration. The fact that it also resembled a giant smiley face when viewed from orbit was, Rodriguez assured him, purely coincidental. O'Malley, not content with merely leading her fellow cadets, had somehow ended up giving guest lectures to the Academy's senior instructors. Zixnax had attended one out of curiosity, and left with a headache and a newfound respect for the art of winging it. As for the Chen and Li, well, Zixnax had made it a policy to only check on their activities every other day. It was better for his sanity that way. The last time he'd visited their workshop, he'd found them gleefully dismantling a black hole generator while debating the merits of various Earth snack foods. "But sir," Li had protested when Zixnax expressed his concerns, "how else are we going to make the ultimate popcorn popper?" It was during one of these routine, and he used that term very loosely, check-ins, that Zixnax received the news that would change the course of galactic history. "General!" A frantic aide burst into the room, nearly tripping over his own tentacles. "We've received an emergency transmission from the Galactic Council. The Vexcar Horde has launched a surprise attack on our outer colonies." Zixnax felt his heart sink. The Vexcar were a scourge upon the galaxy, a race of vicious warriors that made even the humans look tame by comparison. If they were attacking in force, it could mean the end of everything they'd built. But before he could even begin to formulate a response, he heard a whoop of excitement from behind him. Turning, he saw all 5 human cadets grinning like maniacs. "Finally," Jensen exclaimed, cracking her knuckles, "a chance to test our skills in the real world." Cadets," Zixnax began, not sure how to break it to them gently. "This isn't a simulation. The Vexcar are the most feared warriors in the galaxy. Entire battle fleets have fallen before them." O'Malley's grin only widened. "With all due respect, sir, that was before they met us. Now, are you going to tell us where the action is, or do we need to commandeer a ship and find it ourselves?" Zixnax looked at the 5 humans, saw the fire in their eyes, and made a decision that would be debated in galactic history books for millennia to come. "Right," he said, straightening to his full height. "Cadets, consider yourselves field promoted. We leave for the front in 10 minutes. As the humans cheered and raced off to prepare, Zixnax allowed himself a small smile. "The Vexcar think they're invincible," he thought. "Wait until they meet Earth's finest. May the cosmos have mercy on their souls, because these cadets certainly won't." The journey to the front lines was eventful, to say the least. General Zixnax had requisitioned the Academy's fastest battle cruiser, the Indomitable, for their mission. Within hours of leaving orbit, he was seriously reconsidering the wisdom of letting 5 human cadets loose on a state-of-the-art warship. "Cadet Rodriguez," he said, trying to keep the exasperation out of his voice, "would you kindly explain why our engine room now resembles a Terran amusement park?" The stocky human looked up from a tangle of wires and flashing lights, his face smeared with grease. "Improved efficiency, sir. By routing the power through a series of gravity-defying loops and corkscrews, we've increased our speed by 500%. Also, it's really fun to watch the energy flow." Zixnax decided not to mention that several of his engineering crew had gotten motion sickness just looking at the new configuration. Meanwhile, in the ship's tactical center, Jensen had integrated herself so thoroughly into the Indomitable's systems that Zixnax was half convinced she'd become one with the ship's AI. "Sir?" she called out, her eyes unfocused as she processed vast amounts of data. "I've identified 17 critical weaknesses in the Vexcar fleet's defenses, rerouted their communications through a black hole, and reprogrammed their targeting systems to play something called duck hunt instead of locking onto our ships. Also, I may have accidentally given our replicators sentience. They're demanding better working conditions and Sunday off." O'Malley, for her part, had taken over the ship's training simulations. Zixnax had walked in on her running the crew through scenarios that ranged from improbable to utterly insane. "All right, people," she barked, pacing in front of a group of shell-shocked aliens. "The enemy has turned your own shadows against you, gravity has reversed, and the only weapon you have is a rubber chicken. What do? You have 5 seconds to respond." As for the twins, Chen and Li, Well, Zixnax had made the mistake of giving them access to the ship's research and development lab. He'd checked in on them exactly once and promptly decided that some things were better left unknown. The last he'd heard, they were working on something they called quantum silly string that could, theoretically, entangle entire star systems. It was in this state of controlled chaos that the Indomitable arrived at the front lines. The scene that greeted them was grim. The Vexcar fleet vastly outnumbered the beleaguered Galactic Defense Force. Planets burned, ships drifted as lifeless hulks, and all seemed lost. Zixnax felt a moment of doubt. What had he been thinking bringing 5 untested cadets into this nightmare? But as he turned to address his young charges, the words died in his throat. The 5 humans stood on the bridge, their eyes fixed on the battle raging before them. But instead of fear or hesitation, their faces showed only determination, excitement, and a hint of that uniquely human madness that Zixnax was learning to both fear and respect. "Well," Jensen said, cracking her knuckles with a grin, "looks like it's time to show these Vexcar yahoos how we do things back on Earth." Rodriguez nodded, already pulling up schematics of the enemy ships. "I've got some ideas for turning their own tech against them. Hope they like disco balls of doom." O'Malley was coordinating with the rest of the fleet, her voice ringing out with confidence. "Listen up, people. We've got a plan, and it's going to be glorious. Or catastrophic. Possibly both." Chen and Lee shared a look that made Zixnax's tentacles curl in anticipation. "Remember that quantum silly string we were working on?" Chen asked. Lee's grin was positively diabolical. "Oh yeah. Let's paint the cosmos, bro." As the humans sprang into action, Zixnax found himself swept up in their enthusiasm. For the first time in his long career, he felt a thrill of genuine excitement. "All right, you mad geniuses," he announced, his voice carrying across the bridge. "Show me what Terrans can do. Let's save the galaxy." The next few hours were a blur of impossible maneuvers, reality-bending tactics, and the kind of insane luck that seemed to follow humans wherever they went. Zixnax watched in awe as his 5 cadets turned the tide of a war that had seemed unwinnable. Jensen's hacking skills proved devastating. Vexcar ships found their weapon systems playing cheerful Terran pop music instead of firing, their navigation computers convinced that the nearest black hole was actually a 5-star resort. Rodriguez's engineering feats bordered on magical. He reconfigured entire fleets on the fly, turning lumbering battleships into agile dancers that weaved through enemy fire with impossible grace. At one point, he somehow managed to turn an asteroid field into a giant game of pinball, with Vexcar ships as the unwilling balls. O'Malley's tactical genius shone through as she coordinated the disparate alien races of the Galactic Defense Force with a finesse that left Zixnax speechless. She had Proxians linking their multiple limbs to form living shield walls, Gassians inflating to impossible sizes to absorb enemy fire, and even managed to convince a group of pacifist Floralians to engage in what she called aggressive pollination warfare. But it was the twins, Chen and Lee, who truly turned the tide of battle. Their quantum silly string, which Zixnax had dismissed as a joke, proved to be the stuff of nightmares for the Vexcar. With a few well-placed shots, entire sections of the enemy fleet found themselves entangled not just with each other, but with versions of themselves from alternate realities. Is that Vexcar battlecruiser firing at itself?" Zixnax asked, his tentacles twisted in confusion as he watched the main view screen. Lee grinned, giving his twin a fist bump. "Not exactly, sir. It's firing at its alternate self from a reality where the Vexcar are peaceful agrarian poets. The quantum entanglement is causing some identity issues." Chen nodded sagely. "On the plus side, I think we just gave birth to a new form of performance art. We're calling it quantum interpretive space ballet." Zixnax opened his mouth to respond, thought better of it, and simply shook his head in wonder. He'd long since given up trying to understand the humans' methods. Results were results after all, and right now, The results were nothing short of miraculous. As the battle raged on, the tide began to turn decisively in their favor. The once mighty Vexcar fleet was in disarray, their fearsome reputation crumbling in the face of Terran ingenuity and madness. It was in the final moments of the conflict that Zixnax witnessed perhaps the most audacious move yet. Jensen, her eyes glowing with an almost feverish light as she communed with the ship's systems, suddenly sat up straight. "Sir," she called out, a manic grin spreading across her face, "I have an idea. It's either going to end this war right now or create a paperwork nightmare that'll last for centuries. Possibly both. Permission to proceed?" Zixnax by this point had learned that the correct answer was always yes. "Granted, Cadet. Let's see what you've got." With a whoop of glee, Jensen's fingers flew across her console. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, slowly at first but with gathering speed, the Vexcar ships began to move. Not in retreat, not to attack, but in formation. "Cadet," Zixnax said slowly, "why are the enemy ships arranging themselves into a giant smiley face?" "Oh, that's just the start, sir," Jensen replied, not taking her eyes off her work. "Watch this." Suddenly the comms crackled to life, but instead of the harsh, guttural tones of the Vexcar, the voice that boomed across every channel was singing. "Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down." Zixnax watched in disbelief as the entire Vexcar fleet, their fearsome warships now arranged in a giant, grinning emoticon, began to dance. Actual choreographed dancing. In space. "What? What have you done?" he whispered, unsure whether to be impressed or terrified. Jensen leaned back in her chair, looking immensely pleased with herself. "I've introduced the Vexcar to the ancient Terran art of the Rickroll, sir. Also, I may have reprogrammed their entire cultural database to convince them that elaborate dance numbers are the highest form of warfare." For a long moment, silence reigned on the bridge of the Indomitable. Then, starting as a low chuckle and building to a full-bellied laugh, General Zixnax found himself overwhelmed by the sheer absurdity of it all. As the rest of the crew joined in, their laughter echoing across the comms to the other ships in the fleet, Zixnax realized that the galaxy would never be the same again. The Vexcar threat had been neutralized not through superior firepower or noble sacrifice, but through sheer, unbridled human insanity. In the days that followed, as the dust settled and the enormity of what they'd accomplished began to sink in, Zixnax found himself faced with a barrage of questions from the Galactic Council. How had they achieved victory against such impossible odds? What new superweapon had they employed? What was the secret to their success? The general considered his words carefully, his gaze drifting to where his 5 human cadets stood, looking far too innocent for beings that had just rewritten the laws of warfare. With a smile that was equal parts pride and resignation, he gave the only answer he could. "Gentle beings of the Council," he said, his tentacles gesturing expansively, "let me introduce you to humanity's greatest weapon, the Terran Cadet. May the cosmos have mercy on us all." As the council chambers erupted into chaos, Zixnax leaned back in his hoverchair and allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The galaxy might not be ready for humanity, but it was certainly going to be a more interesting place with them in it. After all, he mused, watching as Jensen began excitedly explaining the concept of a dance-off to a bewildered counselor, if you can't beat them, well, you might as well join the dance. Epilogue. In the years that followed, the tale of the 5 Terran cadets, as they came to be known, grew to legendary proportions. Across the galaxy, their exploits were recounted in hushed whispers and raucous tavern songs alike. They spoke of Jensen, the cyber witch, who could seduce entire fleets with nothing but code and a wicked sense of humor. Of Rodriguez, the mad engineer, whose creations defied the laws of physics and common sense in equal measure. Of O'Malley, the tactical tempest, whose battle plans read like fever dreams, but won wars. And of course there were Chen and Li, the quantum jesters, whose antics had philosophers and physicists alike questioning the nature of reality and comedy. As for General Zixnax, he found himself thrust into the role of humanity's greatest advocate in the galactic community. It was a position that brought him equal parts pride and exasperation, much like his relationship with the cadets themselves. "No, Counselor," he'd find himself explaining for the umpteenth time. "We cannot simply copy human unpredictability. Yes, I'm aware that Cadet Rodriguez's probability drive seems to violate causality. No, I don't know why it only works if you hum Stayin' Alive while activating it. That's just how they are. But for all the headaches, for all the sleepless nights wondering what impossible feat the humans would accomplish next, Zixnax wouldn't have traded it for anything. The galaxy was changing, growing, evolving in ways no one could have predicted. And at the heart of it all were 5 young humans who'd looked at the impossible and said, "Hold my beer." As Zixnax settled into his office one evening, years after that fateful battle simulation, he noticed a small package on his desk. Opening it, he found a holophoto of himself surrounded by the 5 cadets, all grinning madly after their victory over the Vex car. Underneath was a note that simply read, "Thanks for believing in us, you old tentacled softy. The galaxy won't know what hit it. P.S. You might want to check your calendar. We may have signed you up for an intergalactic dance competition. It's for diplomacy, we swear. Love, your favorite Deathworlders." Zixnax leaned back in his chair, a mix of fondness and trepidation washing over him. Whatever came next, one thing was certain. Life with humans around was never, ever boring. With a chuckle and a shake of his head, he pulled up his calendar. Might as well start practicing his moves. After all, if you can't beat them. "Computer," he said with a sigh, "pull up those Stayin' Alive dance tutorials. It seems I have a competition to prepare for." As the familiar beat filled his office and Zixnax began to awkwardly move his tentacles, he couldn't help but smile. The galaxy might not be ready for humanity, but humanity was certainly ready for the galaxy. And he, for one, couldn't wait to see what they'd do next.